Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. My name is Atiqah. I'm in the same group as Hassan, Fauzah, and Maisarah. We will be presenting written communication. Written communication is one of the ways how we can communicate to other people. To make it simple for you, we divided the topic into sections, starting with basically the introductions, its components, advantages, disadvantages, and the types of written communication, and Hassan will conclude this whole topic later on. So as a start, there are 4 ways on how we can communicate, which is written, visual, verbal, and non-verbal. And we will only be focusing on written. The ability to communicate clearly through writing is what we call as written communication. To produce a clear message, excellent grammar, correct use of punctuations, and word choice is needed. It is really needed. The three I just mentioned just now. This will prevent the reader to misinterpret what you are trying to say by using this method of communications. It provides us a form of record for future reference, and all parties should have the same level of understanding after reading written material. In workplace, for example, written communication is important. It's an important skill to master. And in order to master the skills, a well-written communication is needed to be constructed using the 5 elements. Then Hassan will now present the 5 elements.
Okay, thank you. Atiqah will be going into confidence. So what makes a good components of a good written communication? So it categorizes into 5 different parts. First of all, it is the clarity. What do you do with the clarity? You need to clarify on what you said. What you want, you said it. So use an easily understandable choice of words and accurate information. So in a way, if you give a good clarity, if you clarify what you want, the response, you'll get a good one. Second one is the conciseness. You need to emphasize on the important information and do not over elongate your sentences. So just be straight to the point. What you want, you get it. And that's like the third one will be the tone. Make sure to get the tone correct for various situations. So you're gonna ask for something like a question. You need to make the question looks like a question. And do not confuse it as a factual information. The fourth one is the purpose. You need to use, it has to be an easily understandable to the reader and in need of specific action. Sometimes you need a specific action or direction in order for the people, for your reader to understand what you want. So that people know what it is that you wanted from them. The final one is the accuracy. Be accurate as possible, be grammatically solid, and make sure what is said is as accurate as intended. So what you want, you get in the end. We're moving on to Fauzah for her point.
Thank you, Hassan. I'm Fauzah, and I'll be discussing the advantages of written communication. So the first advantage is it resolves long-distance communication issues. That's quite an obvious one. Written communication can help people interact wherever they are around the world, whether that be within the country or even across the globe. That could be in the form of texting, social media, or even just mailing letters. Moving on, receiver has time to react, which means they have time to read and respond. The receiver is able to read through the message thoroughly, and since the presence of the user isn't directly with them, i.e. verbally, the reader has time to think about their message and control what they want to respond with. The third advantage is it's suitable for sending data or information. Written communication allows sending data and information easily, where the writer can compile their resources into just one body of text, which is very efficient. Let's say in classrooms, like how each of us have been presenting, we put the key points on the slides, or when lecturers give their lessons, we are able to note down what they are explaining. To add on, these data can be sent easily to multiple people at once. Next, we have clear, precise, and explicit, which avoids misinterpretation, and permanent record of evidence, which can be used for future reference. With verbal communication, tone, pitch, and body language may cause people to misinterpret words. This might cause complications later on. Having it written means that the information being sent is clear and explicit, and in cases where we need it for future references, the letter or the text, etc., can be shown as evidence for when they refer back to that conversation, rather than depending on their memory. Next is the writer may reflect and ensure everything they want to say is placed in the letter. The writer is also likely to make the main point of their letter clear, which refrains them from elongating their message or telling extra information for storytelling, which is also quite efficient. And lastly in this list is it resolves speech or hearing complications. For this, I don't mean just disabilities, whether that be some people might be deaf or might have trouble growing up and learning how to speak. It could also include accents, such as all of us. It might be hard to speak in another language, or other people from other countries speaking in Malay or English. Like, for example, with Google Translate, even though it's not accurate, it does help identify the words clearly. Next, I'll hand it to Maisarah for disadvantages.
Thank you. So, however, there are disadvantages, and I think it's important for you to understand these disadvantages so that it positions you to choose which form of communication in any situation that you're in. So, the first one is time consuming. The time it takes for composing a message from start to end takes some time. Time taken also includes proofreading and checking any grammatical errors, or asking yourself if your point actually comes through. And delivering a message, although technologically it might be easier, but if you don't have credit or you have slow Wi-Fi, then it might just not come through. If you're delivering a message through written communication, such as a letter, it might take a few days, or if you're sending it abroad, then it might take a few weeks, realistically. So the second one is lack of instantaneous feedback. As I said before, there's time taken to deliver a message, and there's time taken for the reader to understand it and to respond back to the communicator. The third one is flexible. So with communication, it's there and it's fixed. Although if you spot mistakes immediately, there's still time taken to make immediate adjustments. Additionally, you can't really answer a question or respond back to a rebuttal. The fourth one is costly. This affects mostly businesses. For example, a newspaper company, they have expenditures, so making hard copies such as printers, ink, and paper, typewriter or computer, and space. And there's also an additional cost to maintain this equipment. For example, refilling the ink and paper, and hiring maintenance to maintain the printed. Although through electronically it will be cheaper, but you still have to store the material, and the storage material may get lost or damaged or even the fifth one is impersonality. So since this is written communication, there's no face-to-face communication. So it's less personal. Most people use written communication in a formal context and in a serious tone. And yeah, so most people think that taking news, for example, being fired or breaking up with someone or proposing, you should really do that in person. Yeah, so it's not really good at building personal relationships through written communication. It's less ideal for emotional messages. The sixth one is possibility of miscommunication, and it also relates to impersonality as well, because it doesn't include the nuances of tone of voice or facial expressions. So humorous and sarcastic comments is harder to convey, and people may construe that as an insult. A liability issue. Since oral communication, it's easily forgotten of what someone said, perhaps like 2 days before, or yesterday, or even this morning. So for written communication, there's a permanent evidence for that, and it's also riskier, especially through electronic device, because they can date the time of what you said, and it's also easy to replicate written communication. This makes it much more riskier. And so sending an inappropriate email, for example, saying an off-color joke, may offend some people, and the people that find it funny may forward it to thousands of recipients, and that might not be a good look for you. Putting it in a workplace context, there's a possibility of information and documents being leaked, and that may cause detrimental impact to the company. I'll pass this.
Right. So for the final one is the types of written communication. So how many written communication do we get here? They are divided into 3 parts: formal, informal, and whole. So first of all, formal. So what do we have here? The formal consists of memos, reports, essays, minutes, and academic documents. Whereas the informal, we have the social media, blogs, instant messages, promotions, materials. And the one that can be both is emails, newspapers, and letters. So email is currently the dominant method of formal communication in terms of formal communication. Yeah. A professional area, where social media is dominant in the informal communication. So for example, example for email is for Google Mail, and when it comes to social media, it's WhatsApp. So for the final part, written communication is a ubiquitous form of communication and is also an important process in our everyday life. So thank you very much for listening.